The Book of Revelation, Episode 3. Okay, tonight we will continue to learn to decipher, decode, and uncover the mysteries of this book. One of the goals of this class is not to just spoon feed the answers, but rather help you understand why things are written and how things are written. Anybody can just read answers, but not everyone understands the content and context. And so that's our goal. So tonight, we're going to look at the literary style that John chose to use. And this is going to explain why he lays out the words he does. The first chapter lays out what will be in this entire book. And so that's why this first chapter is pretty important. And we want to gather all the pieces so that we know what's ahead. If we know what's coming, it'll help us define what we see as we come to it. So let's look at what we've discovered so far. In verse 1, we discovered what this book is about, the revelation of Jesus Christ, the unveiling of Jesus Christ. And most people might think, wait a minute, I thought that this book was about the revelation or the unveiling of the end times. Interesting, huh? So we'll read verse 1, and it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants. What did he give him? To share what? It says things which must shortly take place. That means that the primary things and events mentioned in this book are to shortly take place, soon. Then it goes on to say, and he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John. So God gave a message to John from an angel for his servants. And then verse 2 says, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. So we have already learned that this message that John is receiving from God through an angel is something that is for him to give to servants. So this message received and then communicated by John in this letter. And John's writings, he puts it in a way where he's speaking to his readers through symbols, heavenly visions, cultural images, and codes. Because John wrote in this kind of language. He wrote this book on purpose. And many people today just kind of throw their hands up in bewilderment and just figure, well, I don't know what this means. And so as a result, what people have done is they've gone to Revelations and picked out pieces that they understand. And then they leave the rest there. You know, we pick out the judgment seat. We pick out he stands at the door and knock. We pick out all these pieces that we kind of know, but then so much is left on the plate. So this class is designed to decipher, decode, and uncover the rest of the stuff on the plate that is usually left there. We've also learned up to this point that this book is aimed at a very specific group. This book is aimed at the insider. Revelation is not easy to read because it speaks the language of insiders. So the outsider will be left standing, scratching their head going, I don't get this. I don't know what this means. So this is why we have chosen to become one of the insiders. And to the insider of the first century, this book was not hard to understand. Why was that? Because they knew the symbols, they knew the cultural images, they knew the codes, they knew what they meant. And this is why we're learning what the symbols and the cultural images, etc., are. And so we've learned that the first century reader was already accustomed to these things. And the literature that they were accustomed to often used animals to represent humans. So when John spoke of animals, the first century reader already knew that the animals represented humans. Then it was just the point of simply figuring out what humans that John was referring to in their time. And this is why John used animals in his writing, such as sheep, bulls, leopards, bears, dragon, beasts, lambs, lion, ox, eagle, and it goes on. So John wanted the reader to simply figure it out. Also because some of the humans that he was referring to were still living in that time. So animals representing humans. That's kind of like, in this era, we have superheroes, right? In movies. We have Batman, Superman, Thor, Hulk, Mr. Incredible, Flash, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, right? Now let's say that I get a vision of the church being the superheroes of our community, okay? Coming to bring hope and faith and trust and life and light to a darkened world. So I might go on to say it like, I see the church dressed in armor like Iron Man, with turbo thrusters on their feet, being lifted up to hover over the streets of our neighborhood, shining a light that expels darkness. Ooh. Now, if I shared that vision with you because of our current culture, you would recognize the culture images that I shared with you. Now, if I wrote that down and people read that from other generations removed from us, they might read it and go, so they wore armor? So they walked around with armor? Interesting. So they needed to light up their own streets to see at night? See what I'm talking about? This wouldn't be confusing for our culture if we talked about superheroes, but for another culture and maybe another time, it would be confusing. We'd kind of figure, what does that mean? What is Iron Man? Is it a man made of iron? Right? See, but in our culture, we know what it means. So similar to this, in their culture, they knew, they were accustomed to the animals representing humans. And that's one of the reasons why John said that. Now, John in Hebrew is Yohanan. That's how you say his name in Hebrew, Yohanan. So John also used a code system. One of the code systems he and those in the first century, the insiders, used was called the Gematria code, which is how the first century readers figured out the code, the number of who the mark of the beast was. And for the first century, what was figured out was Nero Caesar. Now, if you want to find out more about how we came to that or how that came about, I think it was from last week's teaching, you can easily find that on our YouTube channel, where you will not only find the recordings of this class, but you'll find also our Sunday teachings there, all for free. So simply go to YouTube and type in Powerhouse San Pedro, and then you'll find what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to in our previous classes. So now we're going to look at why Yohanan wrote this book in the literary style that he did. Now remember, now in the first chapter of what we're in, we will discover what will be in the rest of the book. So what we're covering right now, remember throughout the book. Understand that the things we learn from this book are going to be echoed also throughout Scripture. So it's not just for this book. In other words, the structure that we learn about, we will see it throughout you'll see it throughout all of Scripture. So what we're learning will benefit us more than just understanding this book. I want to point out now for today that there are 7 blessings in the book of Revelation. Verse 3 is one of the 7. And I want to show you something amazing about the structure of how John wrote this book. Now remember, this is a book coming from Hebrew traditions. So it's going to have certain things done in a way that is very typical of Jewish literature. So we're going to pick it up in verse 3. Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. And I'm reading from today, a New King James Version. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near. I'll pause there for a second. Remember how I said that the first chapter reveals what will be in the rest of the book. So let me read that again. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near. So we're going to look at the literary style that he used. Here in this third verse, we already encounter the first blessing of the 7 blessings that are there. Now, the 7 blessings, they're interspersed throughout the whole letter. So there's 7 blessings in Revelation, but they're all scattered throughout the entire letter of Revelation. Now, 7 is a key number in biblical Hebrew tradition. It appears in the very beginning, in the culmination of God's creation. God created the heavens and the earth and everything it contains in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, God rests. So it's the day of God's rest. It's the number that signifies that. There are 7 assemblies, 7 lamps, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls of judgment. And we already talked about how there was a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes. Remember that? All these 7s are there on purpose. The name Jesus, which is Jesus, appears 14 times. That's 2 times 7. And it's not just 7s, but also multiples of 7s. In Hebrew tradition, multiple of 7s are just as significant. This includes the 7 lines of 77s of Daniel's chapter 9, or the 7 weeks of feasts of the Shavuot, the feasts of Pentecost, all these weeks of feast, weeks. A week is 7 days. 77s, all of that symbolic tradition with which signifies the units of time. Sometimes 7 refers to the exact numeric or mathematical value of something, but other times it's symbolic in Jewish writings. So we're going to see which ones are which. Now, in Genesis 4:24, here's an example of one. It says, if Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, then Lamech 77-fold. What does that mean? Well, that term does sound familiar, though. Avenged 7-fold. I don't know. It sounds like a name of a band or something. I'm not sure. It's probably nothing. But it says Lamech here is saying, if Cain got away with getting revenge 7 times, which is 7-fold, then since I have a better reason, then I can get away with revenge 70 times 7, 77-fold. That's what he's saying. So is this numeric value or a symbolic value? Now, that's Genesis 4. So here's another in Matthew 18:21 and 22. It says, Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Do you really think that Jesus meant a specific numeric number of how many times Peter was supposed to forgive? Sometimes it's a number that is specific. Other times it's a number that is symbolic. And in ancient Jewish tradition, the number 7 represents completion or perfection. And it's the idea of wholeness connected to God himself. So in Revelation, the meaning of the number 7 can be literal or symbolic. Remember that. Depending on the situation, and let me tell you, it's not always easy to tell. So the number 7 appears throughout this book intentionally. So I said there were 7 blessings throughout Revelation. Now, we're going to look at the literary structure that John used. Now, this structure, this literary structure is called a chiastic. It's a chiastic structure. And a chiastic structure is a structure in which words are repeated in reverse order. I'm going to show you how that works with these blessings. The literary structure is used throughout, but we're just going to look at it with the blessings. It's called chiastic because of the Greek letter he, which is in the form of an X. And so you can find the literary structure not only here, but throughout the Bible. And so you could see on the handout I gave you that there's a direction that it goes. And it goes, it's like an arrow, it goes forward and backwards. But if you take it and put an X on there, you can see, and that's kind of how it was named. And we're going to go into that. Now, ancient Jewish poetry is based on parallelism, repetition, and analogy. So repetition, we pretty much know that, just repetition. Analogy means two things that resemble each other. Parallel are like two lines going in the same direction, matching each other. Kind of like harmony in music. You have the main note, then you have harmony, and harmony will go parallel with the melody. Now it won't cross it, but it'll stay its distance and it'll be parallel and it'll go through. So in this case, you have different subjects going in different directions, yet you will find ideas going in the same direction and matching other ideas. And it's going to become clear as we look at it even closer. Typically the second line idea, so the first line, second line, the second line idea of the pair will echo the content of the first line, either extending it or elaborating it or clarifying the first line. This is how the chiastic structure is. The key words, terms, and thoughts are repeated. Now, the author will first move forward, and if you look in your screen, you'll see, or your handout, you'll see A1 will go to B1, then to C1, and to D1, and that's moving forward. And then it moves backwards from D2 to C2 to B2 and A1. That should be A2, yeah. So this is a common form of poetry to them. Now for us, we're kind of lost in this. But what I'm doing is I'm introducing you to a literary form of poetry that is very common to them and to John, because this is how he's writing it. Just as what's common to us, a common form of poetry to us is rhyming, right? Some of us think that that's what poetry is rhyming, but that's just one form. Rhyming matches sounds. Like, the children like the ocean shore, we want to leave, but they want more, right? I made the cookies one by one. I hear the bell, so they are done, right? This is rhyming. My cat, she likes to chase a mouse, especially one that's in the house. Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candle. stick. How do we know that? Because it fits. It rhymes with quick. So rhyming matches sounds. Chiastic poetry matches ideas. So it's not sounds, it's ideas. And this is why much of the Bible is written in the same type of literary structure. It's unfamiliar to us, but it's familiar to them. And we're learning to look through the eyes of the first century, of what's common to them. So this also explains why the Bible can be difficult at times to comprehend, where we are simply reading a structure of literature that we may not be used to. With a chiastic literature, it runs parallel, yet it never breaks, it never crosses over, it just reverses order. Our goal today is not to master the chiastic form, but rather to just familiarize ourselves with it, to know that it's there, it exists. Although John uses the chiastic form of literature, it's hard to see it in these blessings, because the blessings are scattered throughout the whole book. By themselves, the blessings seem unexceptional, but when you put them all together, you can see the beauty of how the entire structure of Revelation was built on these 7 blessings, on these 7 statements. So on the sheet I gave to you are the remaining 6 blessings together. So you can see what I'm talking about. Now remember, we're looking at a literary structure. Why is that important? Because at this point you're going, okay, get to something juicy. Let's go back to the Mark of the Beast or something like that, you know? Like what's so important about this literary structure? Because you will see this kind of poetry, this kind of poetic structure throughout the whole Bible. The first century reader is used to this kind of poetic structure. And so we're going to briefly familiarize ourselves with this kind of structure. Make sense? Okay. So here they are on the sheet and on the screen. It says, now remember, the A's will parallel with the A's and the B's with the B's. They will move forward and they'll move backwards. The parallelism is not in sound, but in meaning. Not in exact words, but in concepts and ideas. So here we go. A1 starts with Revelation 14:13, and it says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. From now on, yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them." So this is Revelation 14. So it has to match with A2. And it goes all the way. And so we're looking at A2. There needs to be a similar thing here. It says from Revelation 22:14, "Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city." So now we have to see what is parallel, what goes with it. Well, if you look at A2, you'll see the tree of life. And they may enter through the gates into the city. So we're looking at somebody that has already died. And it's after we die that we can experience the tree of life that's living forever. And so we go into the city. Now, if you look back in A1, in Revelation 14, it says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." So when a believer dies in the Lord, there isn't a death. That's not the end. They live on, not physically, but they live in life. And so they can't, it is then once they die do they experience the tree of life. And then they can enter into the gate. The gates is of the presence of God. So there's a connection there. You might not be able to see it, but there's a connection between these two. So B1 says, behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is the one who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame, in Revelation 16:15. So we go to B2, which is Revelation 22:7. It says, behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book. So we're looking here at coming quickly, and we're looking at coming as a thief. So both of these are looking at when they're coming. And then it also resembles here and echoes itself. It says, blessed in B1, blessed is the one who watches and keeps his garments. And in B2, it says, blessed is he who keeps his words of the prophecy. So there's a similar, and we're not going to go too far in depth, but I want you to see this kind of literature, this kind of poetry that he's writing. And then C1, and notice that it's if we start at A1, it's Revelation 14:13, and then A2 is 22:14. So once we go to B1, B1 is going forward from Revelation 14. It's going to 16, but B2 is going backwards from, right? A2 is 22:14, Revelation 22:14, and then B2 is 22:7. Here we go backwards. So it goes forward and backwards. So C1 says, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And C2 is, blessed and holy is the one who has part in the first resurrection. So the first resurrection is, as we die, we're resurrected with him. And it's those are the ones that are invited that will be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. So they're connected, they resemble each other, they echo each other. And so this is the blessings. And then the first blessing in verse 3 that we read summarizes all these statements together. So the biblical understanding of these blessed, of being blessed, many times gets lost in the translations. The Greek word blessed is makarios and is equivalent to the Hebrew word ashrei. So ashrei means happy or joyful or blessed. And so basically it means, ashrei means found in a favorable circumstance. Ashrei is a person who is found in a favorable circumstance. This word expresses the condition of being on the receiving end of a favor and a goodness. So when you're blessed, somebody is blessing you. You're receiving that blessing. And this appears often in the book of Psalms, over and over and over again. So we'll look, and you have on your paper there the first word of the very first verse of Psalms. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Blessed, ashrei, a person that is found in a favorable circumstance. He does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. Now, I want to read a little bit from the Qumran. Qumran are the teachings. We've looked at them before. These are the teachings that exist through the rabbis, and actually this is a writing that was probably about 300 years before the New Testament. I want you to listen to it and see if it sounds familiar. It says, blessed is he who walks with a pure heart, and who does not slander with his tongue. Blessed are those who hold fast to her wisdom's law, and do not hold to the ways of evil. Blessed are those who find joy in her, and do not overflow with the ways of folly. Blessed are those who ask for her with clean hands, and do not seek her with a deceitful heart. Blessed is the man who grasps hold of wisdom, and walks in the Torah of the Most High. And this is a Qumran. Does that sound familiar? What does it sound like? The Beatitudes, right? And so it sounds familiar because of the famous Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, which we have in Matthew 5. So both the Qumran and Jesus use the same poetic style that's found in the book of Psalms. That's why they're not copying each other. That's the poetic style they're using. That's why it sounds familiar. They're using the word ashrei. They're using the word blessed or blessed. So in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus uses the traditional Hebrew form as he speaks to the crowd. He's using that form, what they are familiar with. He's using a form of literature that they know, and that kind of format they're very familiar with. So the book of Revelation has more than most see. And that's why we're looking to see more through the eyes of the first century reader. And so there's more there than what meets the eye. And so the reason we're going through even some of these strange kinds of findings is because it's going to help us understand how this is laid out. And not only that, but it helps us understand how Psalms is. And we've learned how Jesus spoke just using a certain kind of literature that they were accustomed to. So with that, this concludes episode 3 of the book of Revelation, our 101 class. And so until next time, we look a little further into the book of Revelations. Thank you for being and seeing and experiencing this time with us. And till next time, good night.